Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Lady Landlords podcast, where we help women reach financial independence through investing in real estate. I am your host, Becky Nova. Today, we're going to be talking about credit. One of the reasons of this is because I come across women all the time that are ready to go get their property, they're ready to increase that cash flow, but they don't necessarily have their credit in the place that they need. And this can greatly affect what your journey is going to look like. And save you a ton of money and help you be able to increase your score and be prepared to buy that next rental property. So this was an interesting topic for me because I've struggled with credit for many, many years. And I know that I am not alone on this concept. I always thought just credit would be something that was just a number that somebody was going to judge me on, and I couldn't affect it and I couldn't do anything about this. And if you have listened to some of our other episodes, I have talked about really some of the struggles that I've had financially in the past, debt that I've been in. So honestly, when you're not being able to pay your bills, your credit score is just not something that is the top priority for you. We're looking to fix some of those other problems here. But how not paying our bills and not being able to keep up with things financially can actually impact our credit actually comes full circle again, because then it either puts stops in our way where then we cannot increase our cash flow and be able to make that extra money to then pay those bills, but it also then will cost us more. And what I mean by that is when we have lower credit scores, we have to find creative ways around deals to still be able to make things happen. And when we do that, we either end up with either higher interest rates for the deals that we're working on, or we have to come up with some other way that we can pay into a deal where we're probably not getting the cash flow that we really want and really deserve. So making sure that our credit is the best it possibly can be is going to be incredibly helpful and save us tons of money over time. So many of you know that are regular listeners to our podcast that I, in my 20s, went and actually moved to Europe for quite some time. One of the things that people don't realize is actually when I even moved to Europe during that time, I was already in debt. That was already something. I was living my best life down in New York City in my early 20s. And it was something that was incredibly expensive. And I just did not understand kind of how money worked, how credit worked. And it was something that I really kind of ignored. It was something that I knew when I was moving abroad that I did have that debt. And I was just like, cool, I'm just not going to pay attention to it. And it just won't be a problem. Well, that was clearly not how that worked. And when I moved back home to the States a couple years later, my credit was just an absolute disaster at that point in time. It was something that I had now not paid attention to. I was still in debt. I was still racking up expenses there. I probably had more like late payments, missed payments. I probably actually owed more in fees to different credit card companies than I actually owed for things that I had actually purchased. So we clearly needed to get that straight. So here are 3 tips that I have for you about how you can improve your credit and literally save yourself thousands of dollars by having that better score, which just gets you better terms when looking for loans. So first one, this is the first thing that I had to personally start with, was just to start paying on time and every time. And really what that's doing is just really stopping that bleeding. Like I said, my biggest struggle was actually that I had ended up with so many fees and extra expenses because I was not paying what I needed to and when I needed to. And because of that, that was just making my score tumble even farther. So let's get that fixed. This is something then that if you're going to be paying on time every time, it's something that one, you might want to set a calendar reminder or some type of alert so that way you know when those payments are coming up. And the second thing that's important in that is that that means you might also have to budget. In order to be making those payments, even if we're just starting with the minimum payments right now, if we're able just to at least pay those, we might have to then kind of change where we're spending some of our money. It is incredibly important to make sure that we are tracking where our money is going. That is something that you can use. There are online systems. A lot of the ladies and lady landlords love Mint, and then also YNAB, which is you need a budget now, but otherwise YNAB. That is another tracking system. There are tons of them online that you can do that and be able to know kind of where your money is going, where it's going in and out. It can be very, very helpful for you. That will help you identify maybe a place that you don't really want to be spending so much money, or that you're saying, you know what, this is something I can kind of cut down, Or this is something important to me. I need to keep this purchase that I'm making, which means that I need to change what I'm purchasing and spending my money in other categories, right? So there's a very good balance to that. Personally, I'm kind of old school. I like Excel. Many of you know that my day job is actually in cancer research. I play in Excel files all day long. So to me, that's just the system that works for me. And I'm able to track every single penny that comes in and out of my household. And that also makes sure then that I have the money to pay off my credit cards at the end of every single month. But even if you can just make those minimum payments now, that will still help you move forward. So keep an eye on that. Make sure you're starting to track your finances and get those calendar reminders in there so that way you're not missing any more payments. This is just stop the bleeding, right? We want to make sure that we're not wasting any more money on those fees. So that's tip number one I have for you. Number two, this is actually something that I kind of alluded to in my story here. When I moved to Spain, I just decided I was not going to think about finances at all. When I moved to Spain in the early 2000s, it was still kind of cash rolled in Europe. They didn't accept certain credit cards. There were still fees on credit cards. You still had to call your bank and tell them that you were going to be traveling, all those types of things. So credit just wasn't as accepted and just really wasn't used as much. So I was able to live in a cash society for many years. But like I said, that did not mean that my bills and my fees were being stopped here in the United States at that point in time. One of the things that I did was I just decided to avoid all of it. And I'm warning you now, that's not going to help. But I will say I completely understand. For me, it was incredibly difficult to look or open any of those bills. I was incredibly embarrassed by the debt that I was in, by how poor my score was at the time. All of those things really was something that I had a lot of shame in and not having my finances in order. And I get it. I know it's not easy to open that bill to that says, that second notice, third notice on it. But these are things that we have to be able to take a look at. If we want to be real estate investors, this is running a business. And being a business owner means knowing your numbers, being very, very good at knowing your numbers, and being accountable for your financial decisions. So open a bottle of wine, open all of your bills at the same time, start looking through them, but make sure that you know where you stand now. So that's not only making sure that you're going to go and figure out how much debt you have, adding up student loans, car bills, medical bills, all that credit card. Make sure that you know how much that number is and what different categories they're in, because that's going to help make sure that you can organize how you're going to pay those off. But you also need to know what your credit score is. What is fantastic is that now there are a lot of ways that you can be able to see your credit score in an easy way and also get tips and ideas about what's going on with your credit score. So if you're not familiar, there are multiple different credit bureaus. There are primarily three that are used within real estate that are TransUnion, your Equifax, and then also your Experian. Those are the three different credit bureaus that when you are applying for a loan, that all three of them are checked. And in case you weren't sure, they are going to take the lowest score. So even though they're slightly different, it is important to know what's actually on that credit report. So personally, I am actually able to check my credit score whenever I want through my Capital One credit card. I know a lot of other credit services do offer that. There are a lot of free services where you can go online and figure out what your credit score is. What I also like about using Capital One is when I look at my credit score there, it tells me why there were changes to my credit score. So it will automatically tell me that now I made a large purchase, and since I haven't paid that bill off, that I do not have as much capital to be able to use. And that now is actually affecting my score. It will tell me if I opened a new credit line. For example, when I purchase a property, or if you get a new car, something like that, or a new credit card, when you open that new credit line, that will affect your credit. So that is something that I can look at that and be like, okay, how does this affect things? What is it that I can actually do to make a change? So for example, if it's just telling me that my credit card utilization is a higher percentage than it likes to see, well, okay, cool. I can just go pay off one of those bills, and then I can increase the percentage of available credit that I have, which will then increase my score. It'll probably take a week or two to be reflected, but that will definitely help. If I open a new credit line, once again, if I'm closing on one property and trying to go buy another property, that at least is something that an underwriter can see and understand that is why your credit is being affected. One of my favorites, this was actually something I would have never thought about until I was able to use Capital One's credit system, But there are certain scores that are just impossible for me to obtain at this point in time, purely because I have not had a credit card for enough years. Well, I got a credit card when I was 16. So you know what? Like, I've actually had a credit card for a very good portion of my life. I'm now 37, so that was 20 years that I've already had credit. And they don't consider that a very long usage time. So I just personally cannot get to that higher score, but I can't do anything to fix that right now. I literally just have to wait a certain amount of time where then my credit score will go up, because now I've had credit for 25, 30 years, 35 years. So that makes an incredibly big difference about what that's going to look like. So it's important to know those numbers and see what you can affect. Once again, if I can go pay a bill and have my credit score go up, that's much easier to do than to wait another 10 years before my credit can actually be improved by the fact that I've just had a longer length of credit. So make sure to go take a look at that. I actually take a look at my credit score every single time that I pay my bill. I usually happen to pay my Capital One bill twice a month. So that is something that I can then go and take a look at with my credit. I can see what things are affecting it. I can know what's on there. And it's also important to be checking that in case there are any inaccuracies. It is absolutely possible that there is fraud, that there is something that was just put on your credit that just really should not be there. So that is something that you want to make sure that if that is there, that you get that removed sooner than later. And that's a whole different process that you're going to have to follow and contact those different credit bureaus and also the company that has that charge, and make sure to get those items removed. For example, when I lived in Spain, I had my wallet stolen. Someone actually took my credit card and attached it to their Easy Pass, or whatever you want it to call your tolls, your electronic tolls. And they were driving around Europe and racking up charges for like 12 cents, 15 cents, $1 here, $2 there by going through tolls. But that was complete fraud. And that was actually showing up on my credit report, because it was saying that I wasn't paying this bill of these tolls throughout Europe, even though I was not there. And that was not even a credit card that I even had access to anymore. Crazy that you can close a credit card, but there will still be charges being made to that credit score. So keep that in mind, but that is something that when you look at that information, now you know how to handle it. Same thing that we talked about in tip number 1. If you know where your money is going in and out, then you can make changes. You have that information and that education to make a difference. Same thing with knowing what your credit score is and how your credit score is being affected. Once you know what is actually making that difference in your credit score, now we have the information and the education to move forward and make a difference. Last tip I'm going to give for you is, if you were like, nope, Becky, my credit score is just not in a good place. I don't necessarily have like the monies to be fixing those things and paying everything off and getting out of debt today. That's okay. What's really cool about real estate is that there are a ton of different ways to be able to buy properties. And this might be something that then you want to listen to our episode about using other people's money. This might be something where then you can partner up with somebody else, where you will be able to put it in sweat equity that you can now leverage somebody else's credit score and somebody else's money to be able to still purchase that that next rental property. Once again, this might be something that now you're going to have a little bit of a higher cost of entry. Maybe you're going to have a little bit of a lower cash flow, right? You didn't put as much cash into the deal as somebody else, so maybe they get a bigger proportion. Or since we're using somebody else's credit, that they now get a little bit higher of the profit. Or you have to pay just higher interest to get into the game. Those things are all okay to do. It will still be able to bring in that cash flow, and we just have to kind of change our expectations of what those things are looking like right now. But if I can buy a property where now instead of making $400 a month, but I can make $300 a month, and I can still have not the best credit score and not put as much money in it as is typical, that's totally fine, because wonder what I can do with now that extra $300. Now I can put that $300 towards some of those bills. I can now pay that towards my debt. I can now put that towards my bills, which is going to increase my credit. So then the next property, I will be able to get that $400 that I was really looking for. And I already have that first property, and now I can leverage that, and I have equity in it, and hopefully some appreciation as well. So all of those things that can kind of get that ball rolling are going to be helpful. So do not shy away from looking at different creative financing strategies. So we have some videos on our YouTube channel at Live Free with Becky Nova, and also some of our other podcast episodes here that you can listen to that will help you figure out and sort out different options for making deals without using your own credit. So if you are looking for more specific help with your own situation on what you can do with either poor credit or not a lot of capital to get started, feel free to check out the Lady Landlords Roadmap program. In that program, we go through exactly what you need to do to be able to get your next rental property. So I have the link down in the show notes, so feel free to take a look there, and I will see you all next Tuesday for our next episode of the Lady Landlords podcast.